the grace of God that allows me to meet people who are at different places in their walk. I get to meet people every week. The Lord blesses me with that. And sometimes we meet people who are just beginning. I'll speak for myself. I meet people who are just beginning their walk. They have no or very little theological understanding. They don't understand certain concepts that can only really come when you spend time in God's Word. To explain to a brand new Christian the concept of prevenient grace. Now, most of you who have been here for years, you know that and understand the term. But I must not take for granted, I must not ever assume, because there's a whole listening audience out there that does not know. You're quite spoiled as a congregation. You've heard preached to you 30 years from Dr. Scott of solid messages that all lead you back to one place eventually. They may stream and go here and there, but they all lead you back to one place, that God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, that front and center at everything. If your faith does not begin with a factual basis of the resurrected Christ, if you do not believe, based on the evidence in this book, that Christ rose from the dead, you're probably in terms of your faith, in terms of your Christianity, you're probably in the realm of people who are works-based Christianity, because apparently the sufficiency of Christ's work does not seem to be enough, you must add, which I think is, again, one of these things commonly adhered to, commonly preached in the world, grossly misunderstood. We're told in the Bible that all of our righteousness, anything we may possess that may be inherently good, is as filthy rags. And the only righteousness that counts is the righteousness that comes from him, that is imputed, imparted, given to the believer for a simple act of faith, faithing in him, which, by the way, brings me back to prevenient grace. No man can come. For people say, just say Jesus is Lord and you'll be saved. But why utter something with your mouth when in your heart he's not Lord? Lord means he's a king and he has a kingdom and he has dominion over your life, and you recognize the ownership. Just a mere subject, a servant, if you want to be biblical. If you want to go to the Hebrew, you're just a slave. Or even the Greek, a doulos, you're just a slave. The greatest writer, apart from the Gospels that we have, Paul, had no problem calling himself doulos, servant, slave of Jesus Christ. But even if you look at Paul's life, the initiative to follow and serve did not start with Paul starting out on that journey on the Damascus Road, in the back of his mind saying, I will become a Christian today. I will recite the Lord's Prayer on that Damascus Road, and by golly gee, he was against the cause of Christ. We know this. But if we even care to examine these things, and I speak lightly at first, but if we even care to examine them, we recognize that no man can come. We can't coerce people. I tell you all the time, bring people into the church, bring guests, invite people. And don't be shocked if they're not interested, because God has to do that work of preparing. It's like turning, I've used the example many times of turning the soil to prepare to put down seed. God must turn the soil of the soul, and only the seed of the word will do. As I said, most of the common preachments today are very heavily based in humanism, and that humanistic frame that you are able to modify yourselves with behavior modification, and if you'll just act and do a certain way, you will eventually become. That may be true for a little while, but it's not true eternally, and that's what I'm concerned with here. I go back to Christ as the centerpiece of everything, because as I listened to, and this is not just one person, I had the luxury of listening to a few different people, young people, and one young lady in particular who told me that Christ to her, she could truly feel Christ in her heart. And I asked her to explain that to me. Please explain to me what that means. See, I've never confronted some of these things before. I know from being in this ministry and from all the teaching and all the research. But I said, you tell me what it means to feel Christ. Please explain this to me, because I want you to explain it to me as though you were explaining it to somebody else who never heard of Christ and who would not be limited to your frame. In other words, how you felt that day and your subjective opinion about who Christ is. So here comes the million-dollar question I asked is, who is Christ? Can you tell me? And I was blown away by the answer. He was a good rabbi in his day, and he was God. Now, those are two answers that are good, but that's not the whole part of the equation. And that's not going to carry you into a conversation when people talk about telling others about the good news. That's not going to carry you very far, which is why this ministry's principal teaching method of repeating and denning in is crucially important. Because you are the salt and you are the light. If God's Spirit is in you, not meant to be hidden, not meant to be concealed, but intelligent people need to be informed intelligently, given the tools to go and check what you're saying, to open up the book and say, you know, this is a true statement. Not because I've said it, but because the Word declares it, and the Word declares it multiple times. We've said here many times, God repeats himself. If you'll go back and check, if God does repeat a thing, you can pretty much say that's good, sound doctrine. Now, why am I telling you all this? The starting point of Christianity. You must overcome the first miracle. The first miracle is not the virgin birth to be overcome. The first miracle to be overcome, to wrap your mind around, is that Christ rose from the dead just as he said he would, just as foretold in prophecy, just as the Scripture declares, not one quarter turn different than what is declared in Scripture. And that if that starting point is true, that he came through a sealed tomb and he came through a locked door and he appeared first to the disciples in the upper room, and then many times over, and then Paul records as one born out of due time, 1 Corinthians 15, where he lists all of the appearances. He says some sleep, but some yet are still with us, still alive, including himself, which is, I've always said, if you're going to make up a story, if the disciples made all this up, Paul wasn't part of the gang. He came on board later, and wouldn't be part of that equation, covering up a death that never came to fruition as resurrection. There's no reason for that. So the starting point of our faith is that Christ is risen. And if Christ is risen, which when I get to preaching the Easter message, which I think I might be doing in part right now, but if Christ is risen, then he is the first goer. And that's what I want to focus on today. If he is the first goer, if he's the one leading the way, we need to take seriously a fresh look today at his leading. Now, it's easy to say the Lord leads me. We read many of the scriptures where we read of God's leading. And we can look back and say, yes, the Lord led me, like those of the children of Israel in Deuteronomy. To look back and see all the ways the Lord hath led thee. And it's easy to say back then, looking back, oh yes, the Lord was leading me. But I'm curious to know today, some people in the now, in your current circumstances, would you be as bold to say, the Lord is leading me today? Because some of us may be in a little bit of a bind today, and you might say, well, I know the Lord led me thus far, but I'm not sure he's still leading me today. And the reason why I'm saying this is not for you to come back with an answer like, oh yes or oh no. It's to make you really check yourself. Are you really following the leader? It sounds like a very simple plot here, but it's a little bit more complicated. You see, we reference all the scriptures. We're compared to sheep in the Bible. And sheep, I love one of the messages that Dr. Scott preached. He said, He said, you know, sheep are really cute. They're really sweet. But he said, you know, they're just hypocrites. You remember that message? They're just hypocrites. You know, they come across as innocent and sweet, but they just want to go do their own thing. And isn't that the truth? The scripture says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We've turned everyone to our own way, which is the Old Testament way of describing sin. Doing what we want, when we want, the way we want to do it. Now, I'm not here to condemn people. My message has never been one of condemnation. I have never stood and said, you're going to hell because, and you fill in the blanks. There's no perfect person. We all make mistakes. We all go astray. Last week's message, or the week before, I don't know, things kind of begin to blend after a while, but the King's Highway with many exits. Some of us take those exits thinking there's a rest stop or there's something, and we get off the track. King's Highway is an important place going in one direction, and it's a journey. You don't just get on and say, okay, I'm on the King's Highway now, and look out, here I come, because there'll be temptations to get off and take the closest exit that says this way to your destination, which in fact may just be Satan as an angel of light telling you, I have a shortcut to get you there. And you know what shortcuts are. Well, if they're not of the devil, they're definitely part of Caltrans plans to mess you up big time. You know the signs that say detour, and you take them, and they're detoured to nowhere, because after a while, the arrows that say detour disappear. And you're just as lost as if you would have never taken the detour and you would have figured it out for yourself. Voice of experience here. What I'm saying to you and what I'm saying to me today is when we say we're following the Lord's leading, just as sheep, dumb, always going off on their own way, it's interesting to see how, if you'll look at the picture in the Eastern frame and in the Eastern custom, not as we in this country might assume it to be, but in the Eastern frame, you'll always see the shepherd going ahead and the sheep are following. And I think a lot of times in Christianity what happens is the sheep would like to go ahead. They'd like to go on before because we think we know better. We think that our way makes much more sense than the shepherd leading us. You know, if you don't think too much about what scripture I'm going to use, and there's probably a half a dozen or a dozen I could use, but just think about an application to yourselves. And I'm making it to me how many times I have thought, I know he goes ahead of me. The first goer, he goes ahead of me. But sometimes I've gotten it in my mind that I think I've gotten a little before God. I want to get in front of him, and I forget that he is the God of the forefront and he's on the corner before I get there. But in my mind, I think, I'm making good headway. I'm going to get there quickly. And some of you have done the same. The minute that happens, you really are off-road. You really have taken an exit. You're no longer following. Now, in many places in the Bible, we read about Christ, the great shepherd, the chief shepherd. Multiple places over and over again at the appearing of the chief shepherd. And then he gives under-shepherds, the close of John's gospel in John 21, and the restoration of Peter when Jesus says, feed my sheep, shepherd my sheep. He gave under-shepherds to the church. Now, it doesn't say in John 21, you don't hear Jesus saying to Peter, now that you have accepted the call to feed and shepherd my sheep, you can never get off the track, and you, Peter, can never get lost. I think there's this great misunderstanding within Christianity as well, that somehow the believers, the saints, the dear educated ones who are experts on everything, come to the conclusion that those who are the under-shepherds in the church can never get off the track as well. Now that happens, by the way, when even the under-shepherd takes their eyes off the chief shepherd. So there's nobody that's immune. We might say, Jesus warning his disciples, in Matthew's gospel, he's going to send them out And he says, I send you out as sheep amidst wolves. And he gives them the instruction to be as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. Why do you think he gave those instructions? If based on what Christianity and modern preaching does today says that there's no such thing, why did Jesus warn his disciples of this? Because he knew in his day, you remember the scripture that says Jesus would not commit himself to certain because he knew what was in their heart? He also knew the hearts of men in his day and through the ages of time. That if you were of the world, we've said many times the world would love its own, but you're not of the world. I've referenced this, it seems it's been my theme. How many of these most popular evangelists the world loves, they're enamored by, they can do no wrong. That should, for anyone who is reading this book, that should make you drop that one like a hot potato right away and run the other way. Because Jesus gave an admonition about that. If all men speak well about you. Did they all speak well of Jesus, or are we not reading the same book? Did they all speak well of Jesus? Did they come and say, oh, here come the Pharisees. Oh, you ever heard Jesus? He's the best preacher in the world. What about the scribes and the Sadducees? You know, that's why I said to you, it's important for me to revisit some of these concepts, not just to remind some of you who've been here a long time, but the new people coming in, who come in with such bad theology of who Jesus Christ is. And what is theology after all? But studying God's Word, the study of God's Word, who He is as He's revealed Himself to be, not who we would like Him to be. You see, I'm going to repeat this through this hour, and if you don't like that, you probably shouldn't be here. Because most of us, including myself, I can't hear something just once and get it. In fact, I like to say that I have to hear something many times over. And each time I hear it, there's a dimension of something that I thought I previously heard and understood, and then I go, oh, I need to go back and hear that again, because that opened up a new vista in my mind that I really didn't wrap my mind around just yet. Anybody ever have that? You heard it 1,000 times. Oh, good. Thank God. Because I'd be in a bad place otherwise. Now, why am I addressing these concepts? Because we can tell people, hey, you better listen to what the pastor is telling you. You better listen to the sermon today. You better listen to what's being said. But without the capacity of the receiver being turned on to actually open the ears to be able to receive, and without the other added ingredient, which I've always said is opening up the book and reading there afterwards, going back to those scriptures, and really combing not only what did I say today to you that might affect your walk, which I pray empowers you, refocuses you, redirects you, re-engages you, but what was said today that is not a reflection of the speaker, but of the one who is and has been forever speaking to the hearts and minds of men and women. So it should be no surprise. I'm only going to mention this in passing because I don't really intend to stay on this scripture. But I'm going to just use one or two verses out of probably the most known psalm in the Psalter, which is Psalm 23. Some of you should actually have it memorized. The Lord is my shepherd. I want you to know something. I really don't want to say much more about this psalm. I don't really want to use much more than the first verse. And I don't want to be quick to run on to something else, because I think most of the time we could deal with one verse or two verses at best and still not glean everything that there is to be gleaned. Now, there's nothing new. Let's settle this right now. There's nothing new in the Bible. There are no new truths. But I guarantee you, because I'm honest enough to admit it, there's things that I've read before that my heart was not yet prepared to receive them. And therefore I read over them, I heard them, I saw them, but I was not yet prepared to receive them as such. And if you who are sitting in front of me and listening are like me, honest with yourself and honest with God, you know what I'm saying to be true. Now, my difficulty in tackling this is, of course, everyone likes to recite this psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd." I want you to put special emphasis on something today. Well, the word for Lord, of course, we know the word capitalized, all capitals, is the Hebrew word Yahweh. And we know that for the people who are still in the Old Testament frame, Yahweh. For the Jews, this is never to be pronounced. They added the vowel points underneath of Adonai, so it could not even be pronounced. But there was a time before the Masoretes and before the vowels, my poor Hebrew people here, the ones that study Hebrew with me, that I made them crazy with all the vowels, learning the vowels. You know, there was a time when there were no diacritical or vowel markings. It was just a whole alphabet full of consonants. Because God, when He revealed Himself by this name, and it wasn't to be covered up. He said, by this name, I shall be known, I shall be revealed. To Moses, He says, this concept, I am, Yahweh, I am. Some scholars say the name means I will be, what I am to become, and that which I am. And I think it encompasses everything. If God is the Alpha and the Omega, then it must encompass all of that. In fact, many of you here who listen to Dr. Scott, he described the concept of Jehovah as a hose, a pinched-up hose, where the pressure builds up and it's waiting to be released. You know, if you hold a hose long enough with the water on, the pressure builds up, and once you let go, waiting to be released. He explained it like that. And I believe that that's one dimension of Yahweh. And then when you comb through the scriptures, you begin to understand that God was revealing Himself in diverse ways at diverse times to different people, but all the while. In the beginning, when we read in Genesis, in the beginning, Elohim, God, created. So people have tried to define who this Yahweh, Jehovah is. Who is this God creator? And of course, if we keep reading, we find that names are attached. Either God revealed Himself to people, I'm the Lord that healeth thee, or in other places, for example, as such as Abram, when he was going to sacrifice his only begotten son, and the Lord provided another sacrifice, He called the name of the Lord there Jehovah Jireh. And people have gotten that somewhat confused because, yes, the Lord did provide, but we've studied that. It's almost a play on words in the Hebrew that you've almost got to study. But Abraham said, the Lord did this thing. So at this place, he called the name of the Lord will provide. The Lord will provide another sacrifice, to be specific. Or on the mount, it shall or will be seen, which is also a prophetic word to a future time. Different message. But in understanding this, the Lord is my shepherd, I think a lot of times we breeze through things. And if you even take the concept of who God is wanting to reveal Himself as, here He reveals Himself through David, the writer, as a shepherd. And not just the Lord is the shepherd of the world, but He is mine, my shepherd. He leads me. Now, I'd like to go through all of this psalm, but my focus is not to talk about the splendor of this. I'm sure this has brought comfort to many. It's been taken out of context by many, read at many funerals. Not appropriately, by the way. The valley of the shadow of death shouldn't be equated with funerals, by the way. It should be equated with our Christian walk, which we must pierce through darkness at times. Although we have light, sometimes we're in darkness and we can't see the light. Here, this picture of the Lord being my shepherd would let me, if I was teaching a Sunday school with young people, simply say, He leads me. He leads me. Let me go back to the first question I asked, because I asked, if you look back on your life, you might say, well, the Lord has led me. But maybe in the now you don't feel like He is. Maybe in the now, or maybe it's an uncertain future. And that's why I said He's the first goer. If He's going ahead and you're following Him, and at this point, let me introduce the fact that God gave some gift ministers, as Paul says in the Ephesians letter to the church, and I being the under-shepherd here. If you're following me as I follow Christ, then there's somebody going ahead of me. There's a first goer. And we're following that pathway. It's not an independent walk. This is the other thing I fight constantly with those traditional Christian people who are so steeped in the tradition. There's a lack of understanding. You can be thinking you're following God here, but you're still sheep. And what do sheep do? They always go off to look for another place to eat, to find other food. Remarkably, as I was reading this and as I was preparing what I was going to say and thinking all of this, 3 things came to my mind about this shepherdhood concept. Make it apply today. Don't read it as a psalm and the beautiful poetry that it is. 3 things came to my mind. The first thing is that I believe that when David wrote this, he was king. It's my opinion. I'll tell you, and anytime I hypothesize or have an opinion, it's my opinion that he was king. And so fitting for a man that in his early years, as he tended the sheep of his father, so fitting that he would look back into the past of his life to use an illustration that would become, indeed, it is probably the most beloved psalm of the Psalter. But as king, which means we ought to not worry about the steps we've taken to where we are today if we're able to say, He leads me. He is leading me. He is guiding me. I can't make it. I'm speaking to you as your pastor, but I'm also speaking to you as a Christian. I can't make it if He's not leading me. I can't make it on my own. I'm smart enough to know that I can't do it on my own. I tried for years. Wow, that worked good, didn't it? But He leads me. And if I really say the Lord, I love the way the Hebrew reads, because the Hebrew simply says, Yahweh, Jehovah, Yahweh, shepherd of me. The way the Hebrew reads, the possessive is put on the end. Shepherd of me. He's my shepherd. Now, He may be your shepherd too, but it's personal. This is what I love about this. This is the most personal relationship described in the Psalter. He guides me. He leads me. He's leading me along. And I think, interestingly enough, as I said, the sheep tend to like to go and graze in other grass. And I've heard the murmurings over the years, not so much in the recent years, but I heard the murmurings in the early years when I took the pastorate here of people saying they weren't being fed. And I want to tell you something, because there's clarity in this from this psalm that makes me understand a concept that prior to really wrapping my mind around this, I would have maybe listened to Satan play back some old tapes in my mind. Here's the thing. Sheep like to go and eat other food. They're not satisfied most of the time. They're kind of a strange wandering band most of the time. But if indeed the Lord is leading, then the problem comes to if God gives an under-shepherd, and the under-shepherd is following the Lord, not following him or herself, but following the Lord, then the problem is with the sheep who have taken their eyes off of the great master and leader of your souls and focused simply on the under-shepherd as the sole responsibility. And there you'll never be fed, friends. You will never have sufficient substance for your souls. I'm telling you something that probably no other pastor would say to you. The minute you take your eyes off of Christ and you put me as the sole focus, you'll never be satisfied because I'm just a person. I cannot satisfy your soul. I cannot give you, I can if my eyes are focused on Him and you understand that it is through me as a conduit that the great chief shepherd passes through me to use me to be the conduit to lead and to guide you. But understand the difference. If you take your eyes off the Master Himself and the whole focus comes on me, again, these things only come with years and with much frustration and tears. But I can tell you, the ones that lamented about Dr. Scott's passing and promotion and how they weren't getting what they needed, I can tell you now with great clarity, and I want you to hear it out of my mouth. The great clarity is not that I had a lack, because the Lord indeed does always know our shortfallings. He knows what will humble us and what will make us better servants. He knows exactly what we need to accomplish His work. The problem is that most of these people had taken their eyes off the great chief shepherd many years ago. And it's okay to love a person who, brings you the gospel and stands between the living and the dead and loves your soul. It's okay to love a person like that because, their heart is committed to seeing you enter into your eternal glory, finishing the race, keeping the faith. But once the eyes disconnect from the Master and they become fixated on a person, your souls will never be satisfied. The day you forget that is the day that the door closes on your ability to hear me speak, because Jesus said, "My sheep know my voice, and apart from His voice, His words, His life abiding in me, I can do nothing either." Now, I wonder how many pastors would be honest enough to say that to you right to your face. I have no problem with telling you that that's exactly how I see it. So when I say the Lord is, now I'm personalizing for me, the Lord is my shepherd. He leads me. He is guiding me. And the guidance He gives me for you is to give you exactly what you need. You know how many messages come in on the phone lines of people saying, "That's exactly what I needed to hear. How did you know to do that?" Well, I didn't. I'd like to take credit for it, but I didn't. He knows. Which is why the frustration sometimes to get a message, not because I'm trying to think of what will entertain you this week. My mind, you've seen me. Some of you that sit and watch me on festival, I want to teach on Jeremiah, and it's been so many weeks since I haven't gotten back to Jeremiah. Why? Because I let the Lord lead. There'll be a time to go back to certain something, and I know it and I'll follow, and that's what I do. But that's because I'm sensitive, because I realize this is not a ministry of a person's works. You are His workmanship. And how can you be His workmanship, and how can I be His workmanship, except that He be doing the work in and through us? So I'm telling you as a congregation, this applies to me. It applies to you. The dimensions and proportions may change, but it's exactly the same thing. He leads, He guides. Now, I want you to put a few things down in the margin of your Bible then regarding this one we are following who leads. There must be trust. I put these words down. I'm going to read them to you, but these things must be present. If we're going to say He leads me, He is my shepherd, there must be trust. How does trust come? Now, we've defined the Hebrew words for trust, but how does trust come? There comes a time when you must make a leap of faith. You must actually believe that the things that you've read, that you maybe instinctively, intuitively, maybe it's intrinsically, you've come to know that they're true, but there comes a point where you must actually test the verity of what's there, and you'll never know that until you get out and begin to walk in that realm of faith. When I speak of trust, I'm saying you either know that the Lord is leading you, even when it doesn't look like it. Oh, I've had a couple of weeks, I've told you, I've stood before you and told you I have my own issues. Some have been really disheartening disappointments. Some have been a little bit heartbreaking. I've had my share in the last couple of weeks. Like the Lord was saying, yeah, you had a good ride for a while, but, you know, you need a little stirring now and then. All the while, it took me up until a few days ago to say this. Even in the midst of my disappointments or my heartbreaks or the things that are the hurts we experience in life, the Lord's leading me. And the minute I have that recognition, it must be, there's 1,000 things that attach to He leads me. Yes, I say, I'm not my own, I'm bought with a price, therefore He owns me. I wonder how many people who are following God today, like sheep. You know, sheep are not wild animals. They're tended, and usually they're owned. I wonder how many people really believe that they are owned by Him. And if you're owned by Him, then you certainly, even though you want to go your own way periodically, you're following. Remember, I said, there's nothing new I'm presenting here. I just want you to see it in a new way. The focus is on, He is my shepherd. Whatever you are going through today, don't think, well, yeah, but He led me those years when things were going good, because that's what I hear a lot of people say, especially new Christians. Come to God. God, the minute you commit your way and you start following God, He's going to line everything up. You know, the genie in the bottle syndrome. He's going to line everything up, and it's going to come to pass exactly the way you want it. Yeah, right. Now, especially for you listening out there in internet land that I can't see, I've got some seasoned veterans here who will tell you, and I'm talking about faith people, who will tell you 30 or 40 years ago, and some maybe 50 years ago, when they turned their life over and said, that's it, and really began turning toward the Lord, from their way to the Lord. It hasn't been a cakewalk. It hasn't been easy. That's why, you know, every week we should just say, cheer up, saints. It's going to get worse, right? Well, I know people don't like when I say that, but the fact of the matter is, the closer you press in, the more you press into the light, the greater the stains appear, and the greater the buffeting. The more you press in to follow, you'll find more distractions come in to distract you. And if Satan can, by the way, I know what the scripture says. People say, you know, if you're in his hand, you can never be plucked away. Okay, then you tell me why Paul wrote so adamantly about spiritual warfare and about how the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. There is another force surrounding the Christian you cannot turn your face from and say doesn't exist. So trusting the one who is leading us, the one who is the first goer, must be there. There is no relationship, not even in the human realm. If trust is not, we just ask the question all the time. Let's do it now so you can feel like it's a throwback to the olden days. What would you like from your loved ones? Perfection or trust? Trust. Thank God. And let me add a footnote which hasn't been said. When trust is breached, it really is the hardest thing to deal with. What do you do with that, and how do you do it? And then you've got every person coming out saying, well, you know, things that are breached can always be repaired. Yes, I always say if the Lord wills to do something like that, and sometimes He shows you that there are a lot of people who are not trustworthy, so you'll quit trying to trust those people immediately around you and begin trusting the one who ultimately has called you for a purpose, that is to lean on Him, not the arm of the flesh. And then maybe you will be more selective about the ones you trust, including your loved ones. Oh, that's a shock. Trusting the shepherd to lead, and trusting the under-shepherd, that the under-shepherd is following the chief shepherd. People have a lot of issues when I say under-shepherd because they don't read. As I said, I referenced John 21. And there it is right there. Jesus was saying a direct charge to Peter, which is why later in 1 Peter, he repeats it twice, speaking of the chief shepherd. And why he mentions the chief shepherd is because he was given the assignment to feed and to shepherd as the under-shepherd until Christ's return. In his day, he carried out what he was supposed to do. So trust is one. The second one is, you're never going to believe this when I say this, but loving the shepherd. And if you believe this, I'm not talking about loving me. I'm now speaking of the love that some of the sheep, the wandering ones. We read in two of the Gospels, certainly the focus being in Luke, how a man had 100 sheep, and if one loses its way, does he not leave the 99 and go after the one? There's the love of the shepherd for the sheep and even the one that gets lost. But there must be a recognition after you have been rescued. You shouldn't have to convince yourself that this is the one you must love. He has watched for you, for your soul. He went after you. And as the under-shepherd, I wrestle with this a lot. I've said, I don't care if people hate me as long as they latch on to the words I'm saying. I'd rather you dislike me and love the gospel and love the Lord if I have to pick. But I think you can't help. There's something that cannot be stopped, which is if you recognize someone's true calling in life, which is to lead people along and keep them on the path following the great chief shepherd. I think it's inevitable. You don't have to convince yourself that you like them. You love them not because they possess some good qualities, but because their eyes are fixed on the Master himself, leading you the way you need to be led. If you could do it by yourself, you wouldn't be here. And that's not an insult to your integrity, that's just a true statement. We wouldn't have Paul saying, and God gave some gifts to the church for the perfecting, the completing of the saints. We wouldn't need that. It'd just be a free-for-all. And oh my goodness, let's leave that one alone. Recognizing, so we have trust, we have love to the shepherd, recognizing his ownership. You know, as part of this psalm, you can't read this and say, the Lord, and leave out my. The Lord may be a shepherd to many, as in John's gospel when he says, I am, by the way, combining the name of Jehovah. I am the good shepherd. But you cannot go into this psalm without looking at that one small English word, my. Possessed by and recognizing possession. As I said, there are many animals that can be let loose in the wild. There's wild horses and there's plenty of wild animals, but generally speaking, sheep are owned. And they're moved from place to place because that's the other side of the equation. When we recognize his ownership in our lives, we also recognize that he wants to provide for us provision that is adequate, necessary, and enough for what we need. Just as an eastern shepherd moves the sheep from place to place as the seasons change, places to graze when in season there's grazing, and in places where there's water when... shepherding hasn't changed. Again, there's another concept which, thank God, the imagery stays. Shepherding hasn't changed. I'm sure there's some places in that Middle Eastern land where they've maybe perfected the art of how to get them into stalls and do what we do here with the milking of cows. But generally speaking, if you take a tour, if you go into that land, you'll see pretty much it hasn't changed. And sheep are still moved from place to place, and they're still brought to watering places. He provides and knows exactly what we need for the seasons of our life that do change. They do not stay the same. And anyone who tells you, once you're in, things never change, we have seasons that change in our spiritual life all the time. I'll give you one perfect example because I know everyone here has had the experience. When you first got a Bible and started reading it and couldn't put it down, how many have had that experience where you just started, could have been 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, come on, you couldn't stop, you couldn't put it down. And how many have had the season where you just can't even pick up the book? That's seasons that I'm speaking about. He knows exactly when those times come, and they happen for a reason. Don't think because you had a time in your life where you didn't want to open up the book that you're some oddball. In fact, the people who didn't raise their hand yet, just wait, it'll happen to you. You know why that happens, for the most part? Because when we come to a place where we understand the abiding principle, where Jesus said, if you abide in my words, and my words abide in you, what's one of Satan's devices? They're not, they're not the obvious red jumpsuit, neon flashing tail, devil is this way. But if we can just, I'm speaking as if I was one of his minions, if we can just get you to move your abode from God's word, move out for a little while. You've read enough Bible. Go out and do something outside. You don't need to be in the word, not even for 5 minutes, because you were in church today. You opened your Bible once this week. That's enough. Satan's very crafty, and we are not ignorant of his devices. So it begins with a season of pulling back, or we call spiritual declension. And it doesn't take long until you might say the appetite that I once had isn't there anymore. Don't despair. If you're there, by the way, don't despair. If you can't pray for yourself today, find someone who does pray and ask them to pray for you, that the Lord will help you to find your way back. There's no shame in confessing to someone, I'm a little lost. I don't know why, I don't know what the reason is, I just can't seem to get. There's no shame in that. There's shame in not opening your mouth and speaking to him and telling him. Or we'll go to the least best, but it's still there, asking someone, please pray for me, because I'm having a hard time. And you'll find something in genuineness of asking even somebody who prays all the time to pray for you. Just that simple act is a recognition you haven't committed the unpardonable sin, because most people say once the taste is gone, you're not opening the book anymore, you must have done something real bad. It's the sin above all sins, and there's no turning back. Well, the very fact that you would have the courage to talk to God in that state or to ask someone to pray for you tells you God's not finished with you. You're just going through a season. We'll call it a dry spell. Sometimes we'll call it Satan's attack on the very thing that kept you rooted and grounded in the faith. Don't give up. So, trust, love, recognizing you are his property. And then realize what the Lord does do, because this is probably the integral part of the message, the constant keeping and protection of you. I know that's strange English, but if I'm reading from the Hebrew, Yahweh, shepherd of me, then I would say constant keeping and protection of you. There isn't a time when God turns his back. If he's omnipresent, if he's everywhere, there isn't a time when he turns his back that he's not watching over you. I referenced this idea somehow that if you'll look to the Master, even though you're listening to me, I know where my help comes from. My help comes from above. He knows just what I need. I wonder how many of you today, sitting here, are going to reflect on this psalm in a slightly different way. Constant provision, protection, and guidance. He knows just what I need. He knows when I'm getting a little weak. He knows when I'm getting a little bit in the wandering spirit. He's also looking out for me, and he's protected me. I wonder how many people sitting in this congregation can say, the Lord, even though maybe I think maybe slightly further off the mark than I'd like to be, the Lord's still watching over me. I'm that one sheep that's real close to the fence as opposed to all the other ones that are clustered together for just the next 10 minutes or 20 minutes. I'm that one over there, but I'm still in close proximity. And he's still watching because he knows that over there I'm in great danger. I wonder how many know his constant care, even if you don't feel like it. And I emphasize the feeling part. His constant care for you today. The other thing I want to add before I bring this to a close is that many times when people go into this psalm, they're very quick to read through. I'm going to add one thing because it is part of the first verse, I shall not want. because that seems to be the lament of many people in today's economy, a lot of want. Jesus did not promise that we would have over and above. He just said we would have what we need. Remember the scripture out of Matthew 6 and verse 33, seek ye first the kingdom of God, his righteousness, and then all these other things that people are anxious about, all these things that are needed, they shall be added to you. We're told also in Matthew 6 to pray for daily bread, to ask for daily provision. Don't think because you asked once of God that you shouldn't go back and keep asking again. But I love the fact that in the Hebrew here, this I shall not want, it's just 2 words, by the way. What takes more words and 4 words in English only takes 2 words in Hebrew. Lo, the negative particle, and echaser. And what I like about this word for want is if you're today saying, yes, the Lord is leading me, I know He's guiding me, but I've got some things I desperately need the Lord to provide. I use the word desperately as in, I'm not going to make it otherwise. And I said, He knows just what you need. Then I want you to remember that this one word that is being translated in the English want is being translated, I took 3 scriptures. They're all saying the same thing. Out of Deuteronomy, I'll give you the scriptures, write them down. You can go check them out for yourselves later. Out of Deuteronomy 8:9, where it says, thou shalt not lack anything in it, regarding them going into the promised land, referring to provision. Thou shalt not lack anything in it. In 1 Kings 17, with Elijah and the widow, the Lord God of Israel saith, the barren of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fail, until the day the Lord sendeth rain upon the earth. Being used there to say the Lord will provide enough. We know in the case of the widow it was sufficient. And lastly, out of Isaiah 51:14, that this bread should not fail. Now it seems like the theme in the provision of shall not want comes back to the basic human needs. So if you believe that He's leading and He's guiding you and He owns you, then I'd ask you, you'd have a rather cruel owner. I know this is pretty blunt, but I want this to sink in. You'd have a pretty cruel owner to not give you what you need to be, to live, and to have your being here. We're not talking about abundantly beyond and all of the things that crazy evangelists want to sell people on that's motivated in greed. We're talking about what you need. You'd have a pretty cruel master who wouldn't provide food enough for you. Let's go first to the Word as bread, the bread of life, and then bread for your table. So when we say the Lord leads, the Lord is my shepherd, and I put on there, He's my shepherd. For me, you've got to say it for you. But the Lord is my shepherd, I'm speaking for me. I have a good master. He knows exactly what I need. He knows when I'm weak, and when I'm weak, in my weakness, in my frailty, I'm made strong. He knows when I'm down, and as long as I'll lift my face, like the psalmist said in Psalm 42, towards the light of His countenance, He's the lifter up of my person. I have a good, faithful master. He's never left me. Although I've taken some silly ideas sometimes that He's busy doing other things. I sometimes think that God is like Superman, busy rescuing the rest of the world, and He's left me plummeting to the depths while He goes to rescue somebody else. It's not like that. I serve a wonderful master who sees the tears. I wonder when we read this afresh and you say for you, the Lord is my shepherd, will it encompass ownership in your life? That He owns you? And therefore, if He owns you, a good and kind and powerful and omnipotent master that He is, would never let you, just for the sake of, be without the things that you need. Now, this is not a promise of some false name it and claim it. This is the promise that God gives to those who recognize ownership in their lives. I wasn't bought out of some random field, and you weren't bought out of some random field, but His blood from the cross bought my cleansing and my salvation and my forgiveness and my pardon and my present, my past, my present, and my future eternally. I serve a great master who is my Lord and Savior, my shepherd, leading and guiding me and leading and guiding you. So when you come back to this, I'm going to start going back to the very beginning and ask you something. When people say, yes, Jesus is my Lord, that means he is your king, and that means he has a kingdom, and that means you are a subject in his kingdom. You're either part of his subject, you understand that he's leading, he's at the forefront, he's the first goer, and we're following along, his under shepherd and then the sheep. And he has not left us. He has not left us wanting, lacking, needing. In fact, if I were to go into the rest of this psalm, I could talk to you about all the things that he gives. Providing rest, providing the restoration of my soul, leading me in paths of righteousness, preparing abundant things for me in the presence of mine enemies. Here, take that. But I don't want you to focus on that. I want you to focus on one small word in that first verse, my. I wonder how many will say this in their heart. I'm not asking you to say it aloud, but in your heart today, and say it afresh. That is, I know he's leading me. He's guiding me. My shepherd has led me thus far, and he's going to lead me to the place where the river of life flows, where there's no more sorrow, there's no more tears, there's no more pain, there's no more suffering, if I'll just keep following. And if I don't think that I should be going ahead of him because I'm just tired of going at this pace. I'd like to speed this thing up and get the show on the road. But he knows just what I need. The Lord is my shepherd. I'm wondering if you'll be saying that today as you leave here. The Lord is my shepherd. That's his message to you today. I'm Pastor Melissa Scott, pastor of Faith Center, Glendale, California. I teach every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. If you'd like to attend services with us, simply call the 800 number, that is 800-338-3030, to join us. If you'd like to watch, listen, and learn 24 hours a day, simply log on to our website at www.pastormelissascott.com.